we're entering a new week. Let's just root in our purpose and why we're coming here. And it's to talk about our own respective journeys into climate, and keeping the view on the forward, just momentum. So thanks for joining. I am super stoked to introduce you guys to Jonathan. Honestly, I'm not gonna spend too much time introing him because you're gonna get to hear directly from him all about his journey. But I met Jonathan through the Aspen Institute Climate Future Leaders program, and I know that he's just a wealth of knowledge and hopefully, can be a little bit of a beacon of inspiration for us all. So, Jonathan, I'm going to give you the floor. But yeah, would love to just hear about your journey into climate, the trials and tribulations, but also what's worked. And yeah, any advice you might have for other young leaders.
Yeah, thanks for that. And thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here with all of you. Um, my name is Jonathan Gilmour. I'll start. I studied computer science at Grinnell College in Iowa, and I was passionate about climate back in school and a bunch of other things. Chose a Grinnell because I was interested in pursuing a whole bunch of different activities. From I swam on the swim team. I was the president of the Student Alumni Council, and I also started a photography club and taught a short course and did a bunch of different things. And was really passionate about climate, but wasn't quite sure how my computer science education would be able to help me get into climate at that point. And um, I graduated in 2019, so I was the last class that had an uninterrupted college career before the pandemic, which I feel very grateful about. And wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And I worked on an avocado farm over the summer. And then I traveled around a little bit and ended up starting a data analytics and marketing startup with a friend from the school. And we actually were doing quite well. And the pandemic hit in early 2020. And we actually started doing better because our clients were mostly direct to consumer businesses that were marketing primarily to wealthier folks who were now staying at home and had a lot of disposable income. And that was both interesting and exciting to bootstrap a startup. We didn't take any funding and we started doing quite well, but also felt really conflicting for me because um, I felt like I wasn't having the impact that I wanted to. And I started volunteering with the COVID tracking project at the Atlantic magazine, and they found quick use for my computer science skills and data science abilities. And all of a sudden, I was taking on more and more projects as a volunteer there. And I decided to leave the startup and volunteer full time through the end of the project, which was in May of 2021. And while I was there, I learned so much and contributed to a bunch of our writing and led data entry shifts and helped sort of wrap up and open source all of our software. And this got me thinking. I was like, oh, you know, this sort of data collection and science communication is sorely needed in climate. And so I started moving moving over closer to climate. And I started a small public health consultancy with 8 other folks from the COVID tracking project. The project was huge. It was 1,000 people, 1,000 volunteers at its height. But 8 of us started this public health consultancy, and we worked with the Rockefeller Foundation initially on COVID data, and then on public health more broadly, and then at the intersection of public health and climate. And that was really exciting for me because I was finally getting to use my skills and education to make what felt like an impact on climate. I mean, the Rockefeller Foundation is huge with a very sizable endowment, and I think they do quite a lot of good in the world. And it was exciting to help them sort of craft a strategy for supporting good public health practices in a changing climate. And around early 2023, I found myself pretty burnt out from working on COVID for 3-ish years. And I took a hiatus from work and went back to the drawing board and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in climate. And last year, I found the Future Leader Climate Fellowship at the Aspen Institute and applied and was thrilled to get in. And that launched this. Um, I met all these wonderful folks, peers, young professionals in climate, and was able to sort of articulate a theory of change for how I wanted to impact climate and public health. And through the communication sent out to us future leaders, I learned about the Aspen Tech Policy Hub, which is another program of the Aspen Institute, and applied for a Science and Tech Policy Fellowship and was very lucky to get in and spent a month out in San Francisco earlier this year articulating, climate and health policy and how I could learning how to make an impact on that policy. And in July, I started a job as a data scientist at the Harvard T.H. School of Public Health, working in a lab that focuses on the intersection of public health and climate. And so some of the projects we're working on are extreme heat and air pollution and attributable emissions from data centers and Bitcoin mining and a whole bunch of the public health risks of a changing climate and anthropogenic changes in our world. And that's been amazing. So I've been there about 4.5 months at this point, and I love my lab and I'm learning a lot every day and feel like I'm able to make some serious positive impact with this work. And over the course of this journey, I've also started to try to give back, and I've been reached out to by a lot of people, especially on LinkedIn. And it's been really fun to chat with folks about my career and ideas I have for how to break into this into the climate in a pretty rough job market and at a very weird time for the world. So that brings me to, today. And I would love to open up the floor for any questions or thoughts or reflections.
I
Thanks, Cole.
definitely, yeah, I have like so many questions to be honest, so I might just kick us off. But I'm curious, Jonathan, so if not, right, the COVID tracking project, what other like similar maybe climate adjacent organizations do you think like you could suggest maybe students volunteer for, or like seek out to find those collaborators? Obviously we have the College to Climate Slack, which is, you have each other right here, so we could totally be a grounds and a basis for talking about those things. But like, I know that was a really like a pretty big organization you mentioned, and because you mentioned community was really important. So yeah, are there any other like suggestions for like similar experiences people could follow in a similar path?
That's a great question. I think that communities like College to Climate are so important. I actually am a little conflicted on this. I don't recommend that people follow my footsteps here because um, I think that work and labor should be compensated. And um, I was lucky to be in a situation where I could drop the startup and volunteer for a long time. But not everyone's in that situation. And I mean, I moved back in with my parents to do that. So it's that's not something that I would recommend. But there are lots of ways to make inroads with other organizations and find compensated work. And I think that any sort of organization that sort of gets folks together from a bunch of different industries and backgrounds and develops community exposes people to different opportunities. This is super vague. I'm sorry. Um, but I think that that sort of, melting pot of different experiences can expose people to um, the take work on climate, the giant Slack with 30,000 people. There are people posting constantly about, their organization is hiring a part-time intern, or, they need help with content or copywriting or coding a website or something. And so I think these organizations, I'm in a whole bunch of different Slacks, and right now I'm not looking for something, but I see these opportunities pop up all the time. And I also think it's really wonderful to learn from other people, because um, I've taken some career pivots based on conversations with others that I would never have known about if not for organizations like that bring folks together and that platform people to talk about their stories. So kudos to you all for that.
Sweet. Yeah, anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, Jonathan, excuse me. Thanks for your story. It was really neat how you kind of, in a very concise way, kind of found a string through everything. And then, so at the beginning, you said something about the young leaders thing at the Aspen Institute. I actually haven't heard of that. So I'll definitely look more into that. But kind of like the same question as before, like maybe not even work related. Do you have any recommended like groups that not necessarily get together for work purposes, but just get together for environmental climate purposes? Like I think of like in the design community, right? There's AIGA, AIGA, and that's kind of work related, but I didn't know if anyone had any like group suggestions. Yeah.
Yeah, great question. I think for me, something that's really important is in-person collaboration and time spent with people, which is part of the reason why I live in New York. I'm calling in from Brooklyn right now, and New York is wonderful partly because there you can find a group for literally anything, and there are a whole bunch of different climate groups and or organizations that get together from the very formal to super informal. And on that side of the spectrum, I've been hosting climate potlucks and get-togethers and picnics in the park, just with an open invite to anyone who's interested in coming to talk about climate, who either works in climate or is interested in or has some curiosity about. Very open-ended, very informal, very cheap to do. And that's been wonderful. It's created a lot of community almost without any effort on my part, I would say. It's pretty simple to host a picnic in the park. And I'll say it's been fairly easy to do, partly because I've spent a lot of intentional time this year building a LinkedIn presence. And so being able to post about something like this, I have a big network of folks in New York and get a lot of excitement and attention on that. But um, I guess my advice here is, if you can't find an organization you like, or you can't find the thing that you want, you can start it. And I think with something like climate, there's so many folks who are really passionate about and have a lot of anxiety about this big thing that we're all trying to grapple with. And a lot of folks want to find community to help them understand that. And um, if that community doesn't exist where you are, I think go ahead and start it.
How would you, so piggybacking on that, how would you recommend people go about and start such a community? I mean, especially like if they are undergrad students, for example. So if they
Yeah.
want to start a community, they can find something in their area, something that's in person, for example. So how would they go about and start one?
Yeah. I think, you know, if you're on a campus, you could post flyers, and or, use message boards, or back when I was at Grinnell College, we used Facebook a lot, which is kind of cringy now, but it makes me feel old. Um, but wherever people go to communicate with others, Instagram, social media, that's a great place to post events. And then there are also events focused platforms like Meetup and some others out there. And I think the key here is ensuring that there's sort of a cadence, and that you do this maybe every month or every 2 months or something, and people know that um, there's some regularity. And the first one might be small, but um, I think there's a lot of interest in meetups like this. And so I imagine that folks would be interested and that they would grow.
Yeah, actually, so narrowing down, actually, I guess my question is, so you said if you're on campus you can post flyers and stuff. So maybe that correlates to just starting a club. You can start a club on campus if you're.
Yeah.
But then what do you do? So yeah, since you have experience with communities and work, so what do you do in when you start a community? Like some insights that we may not, like we inexperienced people may not think of. So like what kind of stuff can you do to start a community and have it be different, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm not sure how exactly to take answering it. I think that the most important part is making sure that people feel heard and seen and feel comfortable in the community. And so that makes me think, organizing some sort of an icebreaker kind of thing at the beginning when people come together, and then potentially free food, awesome. And potentially organizing it around some theme. There are lots of different models for how to do this. My climate picnics have been really free form and with sort of zero program, just people chatting, and then occasionally I'll say a few words about whatever it is. But I know friends who get folks together to talk about distributed energy resources and grid enhancing technologies, and you can get really technical with it and very targeted. And so I guess going back to sort of the creating the community that you want to see, if you're really passionate about EVs, start a club or an organization that comes together and talks about EVs and adoption and curbside charging and batteries. And maybe it's broader than that, and maybe it's just dealing with climate anxiety, or um, and this is something I'm not sure that I'm fully qualified to answer, but I'm happy to chat more about my strategies too.
Yeah, that would be
Climate cafes. I'm also from Virginia, Cole. I grew up in Northern Virginia.
And for
Oh
what
wait,
it's
I'm in
worth,
Williamsburg.
I'll add that, being the community person at College to Climate, I think a lot what helps is just positioning yourself in what do people want to gain in a way. So for instance, tonight maybe you all joined because you wanted to hear some advice from Jonathan, or maybe you joined because you want to make new connections, whether it be on LinkedIn or just meeting people. So I think putting that mindset about what exactly would get people interested and are excited, that's sometimes helps me to think about when planning events. And I know it's hard too, because for example, my school, it's a very small school. We have less than 2,000 students total. Finding a climate community here, it's challenging just because of the scale. But there's definitely different routes you could take to starting with a sustainability club or like an environmental club and trying to, I guess, move it towards a climate focused mission. That's just something that you could think of.
I also did a lot of this out on campus when I was in university. And yeah, just seconding what you said, Lucas, I would hang around the local co-op, like the local cafe co-op, and just go up to people with a clipboard and be like, hey, do you care about this? Like, do you care about like the ecological impact of our food system? And they'd be like, yeah, actually, that's why I'm at this cafe. And so I would collect their emails. And then once I had like a good, robust email list, I sent out an email like, hey, thanks everybody, right? Like, we all care about the same thing, like super excited to like, have you a part of this community, let's meet up. And then that's how we organize like our first meetup. It can be as simple as that, right? Just collecting emails, but yeah, also totally understand. I think I saw this. It can be challenging to start a club like officially on campus. It can take you like maybe your whole junior year or whatever to like actually make it official. So you can collaborate with other clubs that exist so that you can have access to spaces or make allies with university professors or, certain representatives on campus who can provide you with spaces to host events without having the official campus, official club campus approval. So there are loopholes. It's just networking, which is a great practice. So yeah, just like get out there and, talk to people about what you care about, and you might be surprised.
Do you
That's great. And I think also LinkedIn is a really great place to find people who care about what you want. And so I've had a lot of wonderful conversations and connections come out of LinkedIn, especially this year, being more active. It's the kind of thing that rewards you being more active on it, like all social media platforms. And so there are a lot of good resources out there too for how to leverage LinkedIn to find a community and how to, find a job as well, but, get the most out of it. And I had zero LinkedIn presence basically until January of this year. And it's really paid dividends putting time into that. And I've found quite a great online community through it.
That's a subtle hint to go add him on LinkedIn if you haven't yet.
Could have
Obviously.
fooled me, Jonathan. Your LinkedIn is banging. And like it was 3 scrolls worth of really well. Like he does such a great job of describing. It's not just here I did this, it's also what exactly did I do. Adding a couple sentences there, I think is key.
Thanks for that.
Always. I love it, Krishna. The hardest part is starting. And once you get going,
Yeah, once I hit 500 followers or 500 connections, then the next 100 came within a month, and then the next 200 came within the next month, and now it's at 1200.
then you're going
So
viral. And Jimmy Kimmel is in your inbox asking you to go on late night TV, and the rest is
no,
history.
not yet.
Not yet. Maybe
Not
next
yet,
year.
but soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it grows like a startup. Exponential.
What do you all post about to have that LinkedIn presence?
Good question. I was unemployed and looking for my next thing starting January. And I started posting about the events I was going to, and even started including interesting webinars in climate and health that I was focusing on the career field that I was interested in, broadly climate and health. And I'm lucky to live in a place with a whole bunch going on in climate and health, and was very aggressively pursuing events in those disciplines from January through when I started my job pretty much. And so I would just post about what I learned and connections I made. And I'm a data scientist and like telling stories with data. And so some of this was making data visualizations and sharing those, sharing writing. And application experience. Happy to talk about that. And Most of it's pretty professional, but occasionally it's a little bit jokey. And I think one thing that some folks have told me is that they appreciate that my LinkedIn posts sound like my voice. And I think that that is important as well, to not sound, I guess to choose a sort of egregious example. There are a bunch of LinkedIn posts by people that are clearly written by ChatGPT. And that's a way to post a lot, but that's not a great way to get engagement. And people recognize when what you're posting was written not by you and you have no connection to it. Um, so I think there's a period of finding your voice and what you are interested in posting about and what the people in your network and the people who start following you and want to connect with you like to hear about. And um, then you kind of go from there. And the more you engage with the platform, the more you understand sort of what works for you, what people are interested in seeing. Um, does that answer your question there?
Yeah. No, that's really great. And I'm gonna read your LinkedIn post, see if they sound like your voice.
Yeah, let me know. So the application experience, I'll talk about that a little bit. So I applied for the Future Leader Climate Fellowship. Um, Jessica mentioned at the beginning, there are some things in flux right now, and I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like this next year. I think there have been 4 cohorts up to this point. And that application for me last year was a few short writing responses on sort of my theory of change and my experience in climate and what I hope to do with my career. And I think that I wish I could remember the exact questions that I was asked. I could follow up with you on that. And then I also applied for the Aspen Tech Policy Hub, and that was a slightly more intense application. I had to write policy brief on an issue that I cared about. So I wrote about gas-powered lawn equipment in the United States. And if you're not familiar, gas-powered lawn equipment is ridiculously polluting because it uses two-stroke. Lots of lawn equipment uses two-stroke gas mowers, which partially burn the fuel. They don't fully burn the fuel, so the exhaust is a bunch of nasty stuff, nitrous oxide, obviously carbon dioxide, but then also a bunch of cancer-causing chemicals and fuel, and burnt oil. And so they're really loud, like leaf blowers and edgers and trimmers, but they're also incredibly polluting. One study found that running a gas-powered leaf blower for half an hour released more carbon dioxide equivalent emissions than driving a pickup truck from Texas to Alaska. It's insane. It's like ridiculous and hard to wrap your brain around. And so I wrote about that, and then had a few other responses about my interest in policy, any experience in policy. They didn't require any, but they asked about it. And they actually discouraged folks who had done, say, a public policy degree from applying, because the goal was to provide a primer for folks who didn't have any policy experience, but who were bringing a technologist perspective to policy. And then a couple references. And I think that actually the application materials may no longer be online, but I can look for that. The climate tech scene and community in New York. It is very large and sometimes overwhelming. I think that, like a lot of communities, it's, well, like a lot of communities that have grown and grown and grown, it has sort of fragmented into different smaller groups, not in a bad way, but just there are people who are really interested in climate finance who have found each other and have sort of developed a group that will meet regularly, and there are people interested in EVs, and then people interested more in sort of tough tech or deep tech who meet and talk about those things, and folks who are more interested in nature-based solutions who meet and discuss. And I know that when I moved here in 2022, the New York climate tech community run by Alec Turnbull and Sanam Dalani was like, they would get like 15 to 20 people at a meetup, and now they're getting hundreds. So it's the interest has grown dramatically, and that's really cool to see. And their newsletter, which is actually in the chat. Oh, thanks, Jessica. Is a great resource for events, and it's also very overwhelming because there's so much going on all the time. And so one thing that I needed to learn how to do was just sort of pick and choose events that were really interesting and that I thought might be particularly valuable to me, because there was no way of doing everything.
I have a question on the just on the Aspen. So I went to
Yeah.
their website right now, and you applied for the Future Leaders Scholarship, you said, the fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
So on the website, when I go there, okay, I go to on philanthropy and social innovation, the fellowships page. It just it gives only two options here. One says the William Randolph Hearst Endowed Fellowship for Minority Students, and the other one is Spectrum. The Spectrum is a blog series. Okay, the only thing it shows here is the William Randolph. Is that the one that you're talking about? Is the
So this is the website for the Future Leader Fellowship.
okay?
I'm not
Okay.
sure when when they will announce what the next cohort might look like.
Okay.
It's not public yet. So but it's sort of a separate program. It's not, you don't the website is separate from the Aspen Institute website.
Okay.
I know that
I
they are currently like relocating at least the big conference that is part of the summit. So the Future Leader Program, you basically get invited to the summit, which is like a prequel to Aspen Ideas Climate, which is a big climate conference with, high level keynotes and speakers, and it's about 3 days. And so because that is logistically moving, the summit is also still in flux, but I believe that this is the last I heard. It might be hosted this time instead of Miami and Phoenix, and there might be 2 different summits. So we really have no idea what the format of this year's will look like, or next year's. So, but I would recommend definitely sign up and add your email to the newsletter if you do want to get notified for when they do have updates. I think that's probably the best way. And then, yeah, just keep checking in.
Yeah, a lot of these, fellowships and scholarships have email lists that are helpful if you are interested, but either the application isn't open or you're interested, but maybe for a future cohort. I've done that. I've added my name and my email to a bunch of those that I may or may not end up applying for, but it's nice to not have to try to keep that in your head. As for projects that I post on LinkedIn, great question. I definitely fall victim to the imposter syndrome of, thinking that everyone is doing all these cool side projects all the time. And a lot of people are doing a lot of cool side projects a lot of the time, which is true, but also a lot of people are just, doing their jobs, and that's it. And you don't need to be doing these side projects to be a good computer scientist or data scientist. I have had a few work projects that have been the sorts of things that I can post about on LinkedIn. And then I've been interested in some other topics that I've then, either made a data visualization myself or just honestly found one and then written something about my own interpretation about it and then posted that. I also know that LinkedIn is a jobs platform and people are primarily on LinkedIn to get and find jobs and applaud each other's career advancements. So I put a fair amount of time into a post about how I'd gotten my position at Harvard, and posted that a few months ago, and with a cool data visualization, and it went bananas. And I mean, it was cool because it was something that I cared about and that I thought was going to be interesting to folks. And I shared a bunch of resources that helped me, and it felt really great to be able to share that. I'll put that in the chat in case you're interested. But people really liked that. And so it's just kind of like, every once in a while I come across a data set or some charts that are really interesting, or read something in the news and I'm like, oh, I wonder if someone's looked into that, or someone should say something about that. And again, it's the sort of like finding your voice thing.
So Jonathan, you'll see I just commented this is a very detailed post. So I see so many people do post these, and now I get to talk to you and you also post these. How long does it take to like frame these posts? Because when I've done that, when I tried these ones like really early this year, like February, January, I was trying to start doing that kind of thing. I didn't end up doing it, but I went through the same like imposter syndrome, so it would be complicated to make long posts. But yeah, like how long does it take you to like frame these posts? And do you think it is valuable to put so much content people do read?
Um, I think honestly, I put probably too much time into these. Well, it's hard to say because it's also paid off quite a bit for me. That post in particular, I spent a really long time thinking about what I wanted to share and then writing it. And then I was like way over the character limit, which I didn't actually know before it was a thing on LinkedIn. I had to cut it back, and then had a lot of trouble um, tagging the organizations, and the people who I wanted to. Good college, us. And so that was sort of an anomaly. I shared another one about heat in different transportation networks. Um, that was a post that came about. This visualization is not mine. It's from the Chronicle, and I was made sure to add the attribution there. I'm not trying to steal anyone's work, but a friend sent me an article about temperature variations along the BART network in San Francisco. We had done the Aspen Tech Policy Hub fellowship together the month before. And so he sent me this article, which was really interesting and very much in line with my interests at the intersection of public health and climate. And I'd also happened to see that the New York Times had just published an article about the differences in temperature between bus stops in the city. And as you might expect, bus stops in the poorest areas are way hotter than the ones in the richest areas, partly because of tree cover, green space, blue space, a whole bunch of things. And so I wrote a pretty short post about this. Maybe this whole thing took me an hour, which is still a lot of time. And I don't know. It's, I guess, hard to say if it like is worth it to spend this much time. But I think that sharing this sort of information is important to me, and I value the ability of the ability I have to share this sort of science communication about social issues with my LinkedIn network. And so I chose to, devote that time. And um, I think it's worthwhile and important to me. And so regardless of whether this you know, there's no like financial payoff or anything, but it's valuable to me because I care about these issues. And then what's been wonderful is seeing that other people do too.
I think there's value in it too, right, Jonathan, because your profile is just that much more marketable to employ
Mhm.
potential opportunities, or just to, you know, attractive to other people who you might want to be in your network. So if you send someone a connection request who you know is, you know, interested in similar stuff, then they also know you're interested in the same stuff because all of your featured posts are, you know, really value packed and you're committed and dedicated. So I think the ROI is definitely long term, like as you were
Yeah,
saying, totally like value packed.
good point. It's sort of like a long-term thought leadership arc, even though I kind of hate that term. But um, yeah.
Yeah, I'd never heard of the term thought leader before I got into like climate and ESG and everything. It was the first time I encountered that.
That's my line of work. So I'm not as cringe by it.
And she's damn good at it.
Yep.
Can I jump in here because I love the sound of my own voice? I cannot be a bigger advocate for what Jonathan is doing. There's another person named Ben James on LinkedIn that does something very similar, which is the idea of just finding some sort of creative way, either it's your own ideas or maybe a cool, different way to visualize some sort of data and just getting it out to everybody. What you're doing, and this is where it's hard to draw a line in the sand between, okay, what did I do and what did I get from it? You're just, as our another team member on College to Climate likes to say, you're spreading your service area of luck. The more people that I reach and know about me, the higher the likelihood I might meet someone who is super cool, will inspire me, or even better, I might meet someone who might have a job opportunity. So if you look at what happened to Jonathan's post, I mean, it went gangbusters. This is like people repost this because it's exciting and they want their networks to see it, and so on and so forth. All of a sudden, people that Jonathan has never met in their life are reaching out to him. And it's things like that that anybody sitting in any chair, wherever you are, have the ability to do that. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to have some sort of edge in your career that makes people want to listen to you. If you have something exciting to show people, just use this amazing platform that we have as LinkedIn, and it can have that snowball effect. And all of a sudden, you know, you've got all sorts of really interesting people to add to your Rolodex. I need to cut myself off because I get very passionate about this. I just, in big, bold letters, definitely think about interesting things that you could post on LinkedIn. Krishna, you're right, easily can be adapted into a blog post. It's pretty much one and the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points there. The job post that I made was seen by 105,000 people, which is insane. Like kind of hard to fathom. So
Sorry, what 105K?
yeah.
100. This is like a viral TikTok.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's insane.
By the way, Jess, when you record the Zoom, is the chat also recorded? Because we have a lot of good content in the chat.
It is recorded. We definitely capture it. Whether or not it makes it into the recording that we deliver, that's a good question, but we'll definitely make sure we link all of the good content.
Oh, yes, now I remember. Okay.
Yeah, it's like saved like on a different file, but not on the video that you see later.
Yeah, it pops up that the transcript was whatever the
Mhm.
chat was.
Yeah, that's the value of joining live. That's why you guys, you know, are taking advantage of an awesome opportunity to convene. I want to make sure too, like, we only have about 10 minutes, give or take. So if anyone hasn't spoken or, you know, has questions or thoughts, I think one thing we meant to also encourage earlier too is if you want to like introduce yourself when you ask a question, you know, say who you are, explain maybe what you're studying, feel free to do that as well. But yeah, just want to make sure that in these last 9 minutes that everybody 10 minutes has, you know, the opportunity to get their questions in.
I have a question, pivoting from the current conversation just a little bit. I wanted to ask about, so you said you're a data scientist, and I got to like skim some of your posts, but how do you come up with like the problems that you want to explore? How do you find like either the data sets even, or how do you like, what's kind of your approach to coming up with the data problem for yourself to solve, for a side project?
Yeah, good question. So some of these I would classify as sort of side projects. Like the temperature variation post was, I would say, I mean, it's super short-term side project, like an hour of work, right? As I said, maybe 2 hours. But that was, that came from trying to read widely about the world, and then also just having a network that knows what I'm interested in. So a friend sent me the San Francisco article. I had seen the New York article, and it was sort of like the pieces just clicked. It was like, of course, I'm going to write about this. This is 2 studies released days apart from 2 cities that I spent time in this year, that show a deep societal problem. And so a lot of this comes from a desire to solve societal problems and being, I think, fairly observant, as I walk around cities and seeing issues or confronting the realities of the world we live in, and then thinking, oh, I wonder, who's done good reporting on this? Where is the data? And can I find it? And is there anything that I could add to the conversation? And sometimes there's not. Often there's not, because there's a bunch of really smart people doing this too. But sometimes there's something that I feel like I can contribute, and um, the pieces sort of fall into place.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Sure. And I guess one other thing I'll say on that is, I'm exposed to a lot of data at work. A lot of what I'm doing is cataloging the types of exposure data of, at the intersection of climate and health that we're working with, and trying to better understand them and help researchers as we think about trying to add to the body of research on these different data types of exposure data. So say unconventional oil and gas exploration, which is fracking, or the role of green and blue space in cities and mental health. And so I get to see a lot of what's out there and think about how, both at work and then also in my personal time, I could do something with that potentially.
Oh, by the way, Jonathan, or someone have a question?
You can ask yours first.
Okay, thank you. No, I was asking, so Jonathan, you're doing climate and health, so intersection between climate and health, searching that. Okay. No, but I was actually exploring what is the the scope of. I was exploring a data science question, which is what is the scope of organizing climate data. So organizing climate data like textual climate data, which is like news and news articles, sustainability documents that companies publish. All that kind of stuff is also data about climate and sustainability. So what is the scope of organizing that kind of data to reveal insights that is useful for sustainability professionals in different areas? Is that a kind of question that is somehow correlated with what you do?
So sort of like getting a handle on what's out there in terms of the data.
Yeah. So no, I am. So my question is, the question that I'm looking at is, what is the scope of organizing sustainability data at like textual kind of data at large scale in order to give insights. So for example, like if you organize all the data, all the news data about Donald Trump's election, then if you organize all those news reports, then you can get some insight into what the US economy, the influence of Trump's election on the US economy may have, like that kind of stuff, no? So something like that for climate. I was so I was wondering if that is something that is related to your area of work.
It's not really related to what we're doing. We're not working with data of that breadth of like trying to capture data sort of from that sounds like, across the news ecosystem. We're primarily working with smaller, huge data, but data sets describing like oil and gas production in the United States or particulate matter pollution across the United States at the zip code level, something like that. Um, Happy to talk more about that offline. Joylyn, you had a question?
Yeah, I just have a quick question as like I'm a master's student right now, and I find that in some of my classes it gets very sad where a lot of things are like doom and gloom. So I was just wondering, as someone who's working like in climate and is exposed to a lot of this information, how do you like keep your mental health okay and avoid burnout? Like how do you stay optimistic with things?
Yeah, great question. I think that, well, for me, I'll say that I think the best antidote for despair is action for me. And so I feel like, well, I feel lucky in that my work is aligned with my values, which are aligned with the theory of change I have about the world. And so I feel like when I'm doing my work, I'm positively contributing a really small amount, but it's moving in the right direction. And part of what drew me to this work and drew me into an interest in climate when I was in college was climate anxiety. And I um I feel like work getting to work in climate actually helps with that. I mean, I learn things all the time that are not good. But at the same time, it feels really rewarding to feel like I'm making positive impact, and by surrounding myself with other people who feel similarly and are working towards the same goals. I think that um, I can't say enough good about, finding that sort of community and um, finding the organizations where you can work with folks who are similarly minded. And so they're, yeah, focusing on solutions. Great point. And that helps. It's hard, but being with others and working towards solutions for all on a more livable planet is really energizing, even in the face of a lot of doom and gloom.
Hi, I had just a couple of questions and I hope I'm audible. Uh, awesome. How do you find reliable data sources, something that's not Kaggle and something that can be cited? And, I understand a lot of your work had giving you access and exposure to what could be reliable. But again, as a grad student, as someone trying to establish my profile in the data sciences space for climate, I feel given that uh, organizations expect experience, I'm trying to make up for it by taking these side projects, and it's I feel rather important to make it on trustworthy, useful data, like you mentioned, and what did you begin with and what did you gain out of it, like Casey mentioned. It has to be a little more reliable than that is what I feel as well. So how do you find these data sources?
A lot of it is great question. Well, a lot of it's sort of having worked with a lot of these types of data sources and developed, I guess, some implicit sort of vetting character or implicit ideas about how to vet these data sets and what makes good trustworthy data, and help it's helpful when these come from organizations that I know and trust. um, I'll share a resource. We contribute quite a lot to the Harvard Dataverse, which is a giant repository of a lot of different types of data. Not everything on there is you know, top tier, but I think it's a good starting point, and there are lots of different collections that aggregate data of different of similar type. So there's, I mean, it spans a whole bunch of different disciplines, but there's, you know, climate and health data, and we contribute a lot of data sets to the Harvard Dataverse. So I know that's not maybe as specific as as you'd like. I think finding data is one of the hardest parts about being a data scientist. And so
I completely feel that. That's why I'm always on the lookout for finding something that, actually provides value. And I had just another question. It's taken me a while, but I've tried to establish a sort of network in LinkedIn with climate professionals who are doing amazing work out there. But it's been a while since I connected, and I don't know how to, approach them and say, hey, this is what I'm working on, and I know you're working on this as well. And it would be helpful to know more about your work, or basically foster a relationship. I am kind of little shaky about doing that. How do I go about it?
yeah, great question. I think that almost everyone who I've chatted with in climate has been really wonderful and a pretty open book. And I found that with a nice intro message on LinkedIn, people are really receptive and happy to give some of their time to either chat or, do a virtual coffee chat, or just remain in touch. And so what I would say is you could reach out to them, you send a message and say basically exactly what you said. I think that would be a perfect message. Like, hey, I know it's been actually LinkedIn does this. They have their auto generated. It's been a long time since we connected, or sometime. But you could, I mean, don't send the auto, don't send the form response, but you could say something along the lines of, I'm really interested in your work. This is what I'm working on these days. Would love to stay in touch, or grab a coffee or something. And I think people would be quite receptive to that. And unfortunately, I'm gonna have to hop off in a second, but I do want to encourage you all, if you have other questions, my proverbial door is always open. Reach out. LinkedIn is the best, unfortunately, or fortunately, for getting a hold of me. And it's been so lovely spending time with you all.
Zoom
Thank
hand,
you.
Jonathan. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Oh, he's getting a real hand.
Really appreciate it. Definitely add Jonathan on LinkedIn, you guys. And yeah, hope to stay in touch. Definitely best of luck in your pretty new role at Harvard.
Thanks, all. All right. Have a great night, everybody.